This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Bear Boat Alaska. Up your DIY hunting game with one of their 37-foot adventure yachts. You and 5 of your friends can hunt, fish, set crab pots, shrimp pots, and take DIY to the next level. Bear Boat Alaska is locally owned by a Ketchikan resident who lives here year-round. Call Larry at 907-617-4542 or go to bearboatalaska.com. That's B-A-R-E boatalaska.com and tell Larry you heard about it on this podcast. Nate Endicott, welcome to the podcast. What's going on, man?
Yeah, just another day. It's a work day. We ended it, and now excited to talk to you.
What is your full-time job? You do YouTube hunting videos on the side, but what's the main gig?
Yeah, the main gig is I'm a civil engineer. I work at a water utility. So yeah, the daily job is mostly like project managing. I'll have some construction projects that I check in on, and I'll also prepare bid documents, solicit advertisements, get the lowest bidder, and then walk it through construction. So yeah.
Do you think having a full-time 40-hour-a-week job might even be more than that? Do you think that helps with the storytelling when you're hunting? Because there's that element of sacrifice that someone who's a professional hunter doesn't have or have to deal with.
Does it help? I would say, yeah, my job is to get it done, right? And then also having the project managing background, it's like all my ducks are in a row.
Mm.
You know, I've got everything planned out to a T. You recently were helping me with the Arizona hunt. That example, I say it on film. I'm like, I'm not here to waste any time. I mean, that's time is of the essence, right? So I'm there to get it done, and I'm sure it helps a little bit, but obviously I don't have unlimited time.
Yeah.
And then I'm taking vacation, leaving the family behind. I have a wife and 3 kids, soon to be 4. So we're busy. We're really busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it makes those moments that much more precious when there is a level of sacrifice. I've had some students ask me, Mr. Lund, if you were a billionaire, where would you fish? I'm like, it'd be cool. I could go and I could fish and hunt anywhere, but there is that element of sacrifice where I have to put forth the work in, and time's at a premium, money's at a premium. So it makes it's a different dynamic, I think. And I think it resonates
Absolutely.
a little bit more with ordinary, common people who are just going out there and getting it done.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So when you say the efficiency, is that not only with how you hunt or also the films, or talk to me more about this efficiency?
Yeah, it's both. Um, yeah, with editing, my style is basically like trim as much fat as possible, simplify, because as my engineering background, it's that you don't want to, put any redundancy in it or extras. And so, yeah, that spills over in the editing side. Now, in the hunting side of things, I'm out there mostly to enjoy, right? Like that's my place of solitude. I love being outside and just soaking it in. So capturing it on film is now that I have this permanent documentation or memory that I can go back to and relive it, because that's my place of joy. So it's not necessarily that I'm thinking to always be efficient, but in terms of like the success or the harvest, it's my first opportunity that I feel good about. Uh,
Mm.
and you've seen some of my other films where I indicated I was trying to hold out, and that's kind of rare for me. I'm not one to hold out on anything. I basically seize the opportunity and go for it. But in some cases, I want to feel very proud of my accomplishment or what I've done. So in those cases, I'm gonna hold out or do something a little different.
Yeah, I think sometimes when people hear hold out, they think, oh, trophy hunter. But I think if you have a lot of opportunities, if you just take the first one, you don't really know what the hunt could have ended up being. And it's not that you're selective or picky, but it's just you want to make the experience as long as possible. With 4 tags up here in Southeast Alaska, if I just shot the first deer that I see, it could be done in August. It's nice to be able to save some tags. If I don't end up getting 4, then that's fine. If I get 2 or 3 deer per year, there's nothing wrong with that. And holding out is nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah, an abundance of deer too would also make you feel like you could be more selective, because on any given day you might go out and be able to get a deer. Um, and in the lower 48 and some of these other hunts, like say Arizona, I mean, it's rare to come across an animal that's mature. So you definitely, in those cases, you take advantage of it. You don't mess around. You
Yeah.
get it done.
In that black-tailed deer one, that the over-the-counter Oregon archery one, you were
Yeah,
seeing so many bucks. And in my, Southeast Alaska, black-tailed deer, Sitka blacktail, so they're substantially smaller. But man,
yeah,
you had some encounters right off the bat. Are you
yeah.
still hunting? Or are you walking slow? Like what is that, man? They're just swarming you like mosquitoes. It was crazy how much footage you had.
Yeah, I have to start with saying that um, it looks like I see a lot of deer. I mean, of course, I'm not going to show the slow days where I saw a doe and a fawn. I want to show a film that captures people's attention and maintains the storyline. I tried my best to have that film go sequentially. So like
Mm,
day one, day two, day three, day four. And however, there was some times where I was sick for a week and I got out like on one evening. So I had like some evening footage that I spilt into one, like I basically combined 2 days. So in terms of the sequence of the film, it seemed like I hunted 5 days or 6 days, but I was out for nine. And
mhm,
so in 9 days, that's what you're seeing in terms of number of deer. And I'm covering 3 miles in the dark, 6 to 8 to 9 miles during the day, another 3 miles in the dark to get home back to my truck. So also, it looks like I'm just walking up on deer constantly. You don't get the sense of like how long I've been out there just breathing hard and thinking, by myself. So yeah, I can see where you might have that opinion, but I would argue that like if everybody did what I did, then you'd see a lot of deer.
mhm,
um, it, the majority of people don't like hunt that method, and that method is still hunting. And I would say just it's it's an active style of hunting. I'm not still like the absence of movement. I'm very active. It's just such a counterintuitive way to refer to a hunting method that I just am constantly moving all day. But there are moments where I slow down.
mhm,
Um, yeah. So my method would be that once I start to see enough sign or tracks are fresh or there's sign on the ground, it's like, okay, I'm going to pump the brakes and I'm going to start to scan more. I'm going to use my binoculars more. But for the most part, I know where those deer like to live, especially during the rut. It's very easy to predict where I'll find them. And so I'm going to get to that spot in the dark. If it means I have to climb a few thousand feet vertical and, you know, sweat through all my clothes, that means I'm going to wear running clothes on the way in. I've done that countless times. I've even changed out from running shoes to hiking boots.
mhm,
Running shoes aren't awesome when you're climbing up rocky, steep, nasty stuff, but it's still better than sweating in your boots. Because,
mhm.
yeah, I've got a path that I've done on a couple different hunts, and it's like I can't even come close to the time I used to hit. I used to time it, and so that would tell me how early I have to wake up. But anymore, it's like I'm just doing my best to get to the top of the mountain and in some of these spots, and yeah, then
Mhm.
I run into deer. So that's where you're seeing them.
What's been maybe one or two or even three of the biggest bits of advice that you took or lessons that you've learned over time? Because sometimes people can be hunting for a long time, but they don't pick up a lot of stuff. And so you can have 10 years of experience, but that doesn't mean that you're very good at hunting. There's I don't want to say cutting corners, but there's if you're around certain people or mentors, you can learn things at a much faster pace. You can have experiences that are much more impressionable and they help accelerate the learning process. So, have there been one or two or three things that have really helped you key in on or become a better hunter?
Yeah, absolutely. First thing I want to say is that if somebody was following me around that had no idea how to do this, they're going to pick up on those 1 to 3 things that are super important that I'm going to totally overlook. So when I answer this question, it's going to be from my point of view after only like growing up doing this, right? So my dad owns an archery shop. I was following him out in the woods since the day I could walk. Like, so it's going to be pretty tough to think about it from a perspective of coming in new. So beyond that, uh, I would say it's that you have to trust in your own ability. So it's having confidence in yourself. It's that you could work really, really hard and it will pay off. And that's kind of the method that I would apply to this method of hunting. Because a lot of guys would limit themselves to a blind or a tree because a deer's walked by before on the camera. And so it's like I know that that's going to work eventually if I just sit there. Like for me, I know the same amount of confidence that if I put in the effort, if I'm out there all day, I'm believing in myself that I'm going to get it done. And that also means that you're not letting down your guard. So letting down your guard is that you're like, I haven't seen anything all day. I'm just going to blow out of here. And then that's when you see the biggest buck of the day. And it's happened so many times. My internal voice is saying, don't let down your guard. Like
Hmm.
while I'm out there, I'm like, stay on because it's so hard to mentally stay focused. You get tired, fatigued. It's like running an ultra marathon. I've have did you run last weekend? Did I see that?
I was on sweeper duty, so but I've run a
Oh,
couple
okay.
marathons and half marathons.
Yeah. Yeah. So that like that cloudy, foggy end of day feeling after a run is like what you're feeling when you're out in the cold, when you're hiking all day. So it's hard to stay in it mentally. So I would say it's that you have to have confidence in yourself and stay in it mentally. So that's kind of the first that's like the first thing I'd recommend to anybody. The
Hmm.
other is that in the off season, you need to get out and feel comfortable in the woods. So a lot of guys too will limit themselves because they just don't feel comfortable going out in the dark somewhere they've never been. And that in that case, you need to drive those roads when it's not bow season or hunting season. You need to hike in that area before it's hunting season for whatever reason. It could be a
Hmm.
fishing trip, a scouting trip, a shed hunting trip, whatever it is. You need to make up an excuse, get out there with a camera. You have to feel comfortable in, hiking in those areas, especially if you're going to do it then in the dark and then come back out in the dark. So people limit themselves by saying, "Oh, we better get out of here. It's starting to get dark." So that would be the other thing is feeling comfortable in where you're going.
Hmm.
Trying to think like third for the third bit of advice, now that you've heard generally my advice here, is there something that you would help direct me here? And is it still hunting related for advice or just blacktail hunting or
No, I think that those are two great. They don't doesn't have to be three. They can you have two
okay,
tip two
we'll
two.
stop there.
Yeah, I think with both of those, the seeing something when it's not in season is so important because you can look at something and you can e-scout and you can think, well, I want to get from here to here, but once you see it live, you might not be able to get from here to here quietly. Or hey, I can go around this, or I've seen it before and I know what to do. Or if this is the main corridor, the deer are going to be coming from here. So if I set up here rather than here, and all those sort of things make such a huge difference. And then my biggest thing with the patience and staying focused is that I start to think about if I was somewhere else and I start to worry about I'm wasting time if I'm here. Like, this is good. I've sat here for a little bit, but it's actually a waste of time. I need to go somewhere else because if I go somewhere else, that's going to be the better spot. So that ends up being, it's not, sometimes I do get discouraged for sure, but then I second guess myself and I think, man, this would be a better spot. I need to get over there quick. And then of course you go over there and then nothing happens. Or as soon as you get up to move somewhere else, then you catch something and then it blows out. Like, oh, I should have just been quiet. I should have just been still. I should have been patient. But some lessons you have to learn over and over and over again.
Yep, so that's all very true. And again, it's like there's no perfect way to do this stuff. It's that you're making the best decisions that you can in that moment based on those situations. And so if you're like struggling with the should I be somewhere else that day? Well, well, if it is, then you'll go make that happen. Or if it isn't, you're going to do what's right for you. When you say that, it makes me mostly think of the dilemma of the night before. The night before, I've changed hunting spots like 8 times and then come back to my plan A. It's crazy, that dilemma. I think a lot of hunters probably share that of like, well, it's just like a catch 22, and you play head games and then eventually you just end up doing what you're probably going to do in the first place. But
Yeah.
that's what gets me the most is changing my mind the night before.
Yeah. I think those other skills that you learn as a hunter too loom large in those moments because if you are kicked out of your plan A or something happens and you have to resort to something else, having those other mindsets so you can hunt your option C very well has become really important because there's no way that you're always going to be able to get your plan A. You could think I'm going to go further or I'm going to do this, but the weather doesn't cooperate or there's someone else back there. A whole bunch of different things can happen. So if you have those other underlying base fundamental skills, then you can hunt your C or D, or it doesn't even really matter. You still feel like you're hunting rather than, slumming it in some plan A sort of thing that you don't really want to be there.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
Right. Very true.
When it comes to filming, then that complicates things. Do you have the camera out pretty much at all times? Are there some deer that do you wait till you start to kind of see deer then film stuff, or is it always at the ready? What's the filming element like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not great at this. I do my best, but what I would say is that you have to be, the cameras have to be accessible. So I, when I do think that it's getting good and I'm seeing deer, I'll put a GoPro on my head, and it's floppy and awkward, but it just allows me to be hands free. And I've even had a GoPro on my head and had an animal walk by and just shot it anyways and didn't even mess with the camera because it's an extra movement.
Yeah.
And if there was a button on my release that I could just hit and it turned on the camera, that would be even better. Because again, if it's not super accessible, it's not going to turn on, especially for me. Because for me, it's always way more important to accomplish the main objective, which is being successful with my limited time, than to think, oh, I have to get this on camera. I don't have to get it on camera. I like to. So it's definitely a matter of perspective there with how you operate your cameras. Now, I have a fanny pack that I rock around my waist, and that's like a stand sport, something like that, from Bimart. It was $12. It matches the same not camo that I have on my pack, and I have a small handy cam. It films 4K. It does a decent job, but that's super quick. So my hands are usually down by my waist anyways. So then I reach into this fanny and I'm not making hardly any movement or sound. And then just with the flip of the window on the side of the camera, those handy cams, it's immediately on. I hit record. So that's how it's almost like you're shooting from the hip. And I can get these deer on film very, very quickly. And that works for me. It's not, professional quality videography, but it gets the job done. You could still tell the story and you get those critical moments. Lastly, is that I have a DSLR, and only when the weather's nice, I'll actually pack it on a monopod through my straps on my pack. And that's where I can get the best video quality, is through my DSLR camera and the lenses that I could interchange on it. And that's really what I like to see when I'm doing my video edits. It just makes a world of difference to have good, clear image with good lighting. And that would really start to, you'd start to think about the sensor size, the ISO. I shoot manual, so I'm always adjusting the settings. You can't do that quickly. But when I have time, like if I can crouch down, mess with my camera for a minute, I can get awesome footage. And so I blend that when I do my editing, and I try my best to correct the colors, and because each camera will record a little different. But that's how I do it.
So you got 3 cameras that you roll with for 3 different purposes. It's good. The shooting manual is so difficult because you adjust it to one thing and then you kind of forget the lighting changes, something else changes, and all of a sudden you're shooting and it's totally different. If you were to recommend some tips as far as shooting video, what would you recommend for someone who's trying to do that as far as settings go? Or do you kind of get the confidence with filming first and some of the, your basic factory settings before you go to manual? Or how would you adjust the or suggest the film portion?
Yeah, gosh, yeah. If you know how to run a camera and you're not afraid to potentially screw up, manual is like the way to go because you can really dial in all the lighting and what's going on and then view that. And it does make a world of difference. And some guys though just roll with automatic settings. And you can get some the nicer cameras, the more money you pay, the better the automatic settings are. So if you can really afford a really high end camera, then the automatic settings are going to be in your favor.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the cheaper end cameras, you can get away with a lot more with that camera by going to the manual. So I've always had to go with more of the cost effective approach with my cameras. And that's why I also use manual settings. And you just need a little bit more time.
Mm-hmm.
And generally speaking, it's like for that portion of the day, your manual settings don't have to change a lot. And there's a few settings like I run my aperture or your f-stop is low as possible, and that allows for the most light in. Because when you're outside and you're in the dark timber, you want the most light possible to enter that sensor. So by running your aperture as low as possible, it's going to get the most light in. However, your depth of field shrinks. So now you have a window of focus that's very tight on that subject animal. And you have to be really good at getting then your focus to work. So that's where automatic versus manual focus comes into play there. There's all these trade-offs.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, generally speaking, if you could spend a lot of money on a camera, you're going to get really good auto settings. The lower that you spend in money on your camera, the worse the autos are, and you might consider dabbling with your manual settings to really get a good image. And again, it's like we're talking about mirrorless DSLR cameras for that. All the other cameras that are out there, like GoPros, everything's basically automatic.
Mm-hmm.
The only manual thing you could do is adjust like the size or the quality or time lapse versus. I mean, there's nothing manual.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just to break that down.
As you were becoming better at filming, did you do some filming in the off season where you don't have the same consequences, where you just go out and film some cows or some birds or something like that, just to get used to adjusting the settings or playing with the lighting? So the first time you're trying to adjust these settings or doing manual shooting, there's not a deer hunt at stake.
Exactly. Well, I started filming when I was just a little kid. My dad always gave me his hand-me-down camera. He always had a camera, and he would just give me his old one. So I've been filming for a lot of years. But in 2012, I bought my first DSLR camera, and I only used it for photography. So I would go out and play with all the manual settings. I'd go to national parks. I would run into some random place, literally running, and get as far back in as I could. And there were some couple moments that were pretty neat, like the Quinault River and the Olympic National Park. Get back there 6 miles, have this herd of elk run across the river. One bull just has one antler, and I'm sitting down in the dark timber snapping photos of this bull in the river. They're all standing chest deep. And I look back at it later and I'm like, oh my gosh, everything's so grainy and noisy. I can't hardly do anything with the photo. And so that's kind of an example where I had to learn about what it means to have a grainy photo. And that experience taught me. So I did that more or less just a photography class for myself for 4 or 5 years before I finally started filming with the DSLR. So I had quite a bit of experience with it. And photography to videography is basically 1-to-1. All the settings are the same. You just flip a mode from still to record. There's a couple other lessons to be learned about frame rate and quality. So frame rate, it's very important when we're talking about slowing down your film in order to slow-mo. There's some other things to consider there, but for the most part, you definitely want to practice on something else besides the hunt.
Yeah, get that confidence. Otherwise, you get stressed out a little bit there. What's influenced you as far as films? Is there any particular show or even shots? There's a Meat Eater episode where Ranello's up hunting doll sheep, and It's zoomed in on this doll sheep, and it's just a slow panning out, and it's methodical and very slow, and you just
Yeah.
get this small doll. Well, it started off big, and then the doll sheep is all of a sudden very very small with the enormity of the mountains. That shot kind of
Yeah.
sticks with me. Just a beautiful shot. Are there shots or are there shows that really influence you?
Well, yes, I would say the first thing that comes to mind is the Western Hunter, Nate Simmons. Nate Simmons is a good friend of ours, and I really like his work. His cameraman Randy and him, they produce some of the best, in my opinion, films in the hunting industry. And Nate has a really good voice and he tells a really good story. I really appreciate his work, and I've been watching his shows more consistently than say anybody else that's out there producing films. I think that there's a lot of films out there, a lot of filmmakers, and a lot of people are doing good work. And I just typically just I usually go to the same stuff, and it's hard for me to add, say, a new filmmaker or a new show into my like viewership. uh, so it seems like even though I've grown up in this hunting industry, and I've kind of feel like I've seen it all. I still limit myself to only watching the few things that I really like. And gosh, when I was a kid, my dad would just play in his shop on repeat Elk Fever, and it has Larry D. Jones and his son and Dwight Schrute, and they're out calling elk with these old calls, and it's just super neat to watch them and how excited they got. So, I mean, these films were produced in the late 90s. I would have been probably 10 or 11, and um, watching those in the bow rack over and over and over, it's just like I knew what a hunt was like. I knew what it was like to film a hunt. And and really just a lot of time went by and I didn't watch anything in the outdoor industry. I don't watch YouTube hunting films. It's all very recent for me to even get on the YouTube scene. And since I have, which has been maybe 3 years, 2 years, I've been watching Brian Call and his gritty uh, show. And then Onyx Hunt. Um, I mean, I watch a few of them, but not a lot. I actually started listening to a few more based on your podcast, and um, yeah, so somewhat limited. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I just feel like I have an old background of what it means to make a film, and then I've filmed my whole life, and then recently I've watched some of these others that do a good job, like Nate Simmons and Brian Call.
Mhm.
And so from that, I mean, I feel like it's enough inspiration to help me with my creativity making a film.
Yeah, there's so much. There's so much to watch. There's some big names and people who have shows, but then there's also a lot of people who are just, pretty small but put out excellent product. It's just there's an overwhelming amount, but I think as creatives, it's so important to kind of
Yeah.
see what's out there so that you kind of know it doesn't really inform you a lot, or not that you're trying to not steal or poach, but just to see what's out there and see creative ideas and share that. And whether you're painting or whether you're writing or a filmmaker, you're influenced by things and you put your own spin on those sort of things. And having that stockpile of ideas is so huge. And think about how this was done or how this could transfer to my type hunt. But it's great to pay homage to that and know who came before you, and take some of those risks with a knowledge of how things might turn out.
No, yeah, I agree. And I recently was listening to a podcast where a guy said that he's just repurposing what other people have said. And so it's kind of one way to look at it is that there's like nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
And so you're really just a conglomerate of all the different things that have happened in your life, and then you're just kind of regurgitating it. I just hope to do it in a way that is enjoyable for me, and somebody doesn't feel like it was a waste of time to watch something that I produce, other than they wanted to see the shot on film.
Mhm.
And so for me, it's that I want somebody to enjoy every aspect, not just that one little blip where the YouTube analytics has a spike.
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Yeah, there's an important distinction between there's nothing new, but also your own individual story is completely unique. There is nothing that has the exact same, and so I get caught up sometimes with thinking that I've been writing an outdoor column for 12 years, and it's always the same stuff, man. This time of year it's steelhead, and then there's going to be the column about this, and there's I screwed this up, and but it is unique, and it is going to be slightly different,
Yeah,
and it's about resonating with someone else and telling your story
that's true.
there, and then I don't know if it's laziness or it's convenience, but there are some lines that are really easy that we can just apply in certain conditions and just, regurgitate the exact same thing, which may or may not be totally true. It's just the most available. So trying to steer clear of
Yeah.
some of those cliche sort of things to make it yours and make it
Hmm.
unique. And it's not just some overused shot thing or phrase.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that.
How
That's
much
a
do
good
you
point.
like sharing in your stories? Like, how personal do you want to be? Because that's your uniqueness. That's what's going to make you stand out. But how much are you concerned about sharing too much?
Ah, gosh, yeah, good question. A lot comes to mind. When you say sharing too much and then also uniqueness and talking about yourself, I almost wanted to go on two different branches of a response. Sharing too much. So, first thing that comes to mind with that part of the question is I don't want to share too much about where I'm actually going. Like, I want people to do this and I want to promote hunting. I want to promote conservation. I want to promote everything I do except for somebody parking in the same spot as me.
Right.
Like, that's the honesty there. So I have to get creative and blur backgrounds or do certain things to not let somebody just want to basically watch my film to find out where I'm hunting. So that's kind of the first part of that response. However, I want people to go hunting. I want people to bow hunt. I want people to enjoy it the same way that I've grown up doing it. So yeah, it's kind of a tricky thing there. And then in terms of how much I talk about, let's say, the wildlife while I'm hunting or the strategy, those are things that are really easy for me to do. I love to talk about the like what I'm seeing, my plan for the day. There's a mission, an objective, a goal. I want you to hear about the struggle. My perfect film is yet to be even a thing, and it would be a blacktail hunt where somebody could just really feel what it's like to go through a day, like maybe one day. So that film may not be successful in the end, and it would basically be a lot of heavy breathing. But how could you make that entertaining? I don't know. So
Hmm.
that's why it'd be like the perfect film to pull that off because I want somebody to also know that there is a great deal of sacrifice and effort that is put in, and that's where I find my joy in the hunt is how much effort I put in and how much I was willing to risk, how much I put on the table, and then it all paid off. Like that to me is like an overwhelming feeling. So that's what I want to depict in a film. Now, doing that by yourself and just trying to get the shots you can, and hopefully, depending on what I said when I was out there, actually help tell the story. I mean, sure, I'm out there talking, but I don't know how it's all going to come together in the end. I'm just assuming that I might get lucky and get one if I keep after this. So you kind of have to just go for it and wing it, and then you get enough footage, and it's like, oh yeah, I could see where I could tell a story now that somebody might actually sit down and find it entertaining to watch or be inspired by it or find the common interest in that we all are hunting. We're all in unity with that aspect. And I mentioned this to you not very long ago, but um, I think the biggest thing I would hope that with my life and my hunting is that I could encourage people to unify as hunters and not critique others that hunt.
Hmm.
Like we all have a different approach. There's rifle, there's muzzleloader, there's crossbow, there's archery. There's all these different methods. I mean, there's others out there slinging um, uh, what's his name? I'm forgetting, but like basically a javelin into an animal, right? Like there's methods that are not super ethical, right? But my goal is not to critique the method or how people are hunting. It's that people been doing this. Atlatl was one of the earliest like archery forms of archery. Is that they had this the natives wherever maybe in America um, they would sling an arrow off of like a lever arm,
Hmm.
which is basically just a rod. and they would sling this arrow up and then hit like a mammoth of some beast thing in the body, and they'd hit it enough times and it would die. So I mean, that's what was available and accessible and the best technology at the time. So it's like that to them was the most ethical form of hunting. I mean, it got it done. And so I don't want to necessarily like critique. I have my own opinions and views, but I don't want to critique others in the hunting industry and how they do it, because at the end of the day, they're hopefully achieving a very similar common goal, which is that hunting is a way of life. And that's how people always then provided and nourished their bodies, was that they hunted and got this food. So that's kind of a big segue there, but something I feel is super important. I just really hope that people focus on, like, when they're commenting on social media, it's that, hey, this person's like a brother, and if they hunt, so how would you talk to your brother? Hopefully it's good, but how would you talk to them? How would you comment to them? How would you encourage them to participate in a way that is both ethical and, sound? So um, okay, back to back to the question, Rabbit. um,
No,
yeah
that's a great
uh,
response. I think there's a big difference too between just because I don't like something doesn't mean that it's wrong. Same thing with movie, with soup, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that it's bad. Yeah, I happen to not like it, but that's not a big deal. And I think sometimes we attack each other. And I think also sometimes it doesn't even have to be criticism, but just like some feedback some people will take as an attack. And if we
yeah
think, hey, what are the potential consequences of this? There could be, this could end up supplying some anti-hunting sort of feedback. So again, you do what you want. Your ethics are your ethics; they're your own to decide. But there are potential consequences for what we're doing here. I think being aware of that is something that's beneficial. Again, it's not something you should absolutely do this or you should absolutely have the same ethics that I do. But being naive to some of the consequences of some of the things that we do is at our own peril, because people who don't
yeah
understand or don't have the whole picture are going to make narrow-minded decisions or narrowly focused decisions, and that a lot of times affects hunters unfairly, because it's that narrow frame of mind, or that narrow vision, and only one example that fits that, and so all hunters are the same thing, and that's a dangerous thing for that, because we're seeing non-hunters are having a lot more control over hunting. It's not just a matter of people who are, I don't like hunt, I think you're a whole bunch of idiots, sociopath. There's more of an active effort to prevent people from being able to hunt, and so
right.
consideration
We're
is
seeing that.
important.
So like in Washington, they removed the spring bear hunt, and that was a direct result of basically a feeling that bear are not able to get on their feet after spring, or after coming out of hibernation. So yeah, it's a slippery slope, and I really hope that people think about that and keep it in mind. And my goal is to encourage them to do it, in a similar way,
Mhm.
keeping the ethics in mind. And so then going back to your question, now that I'm remembering it, um, it's always tough for me to want to be the center of attention. So I don't want to be the focus. I want to be like the guy next to the guy that's in focus, and just like the supporter. That's my personality. So then I'm making a film where I'm filming myself. So how's that going to play out, right? It usually means where I'm going to be talking, serving a purpose, and then you're going to see all the stuff I'm talking about, and I want to obviously communicate a really good story and message, and use my own skill set and what is unique about me to tell a good story, and use purpose in that. So I always feel like in my films, if I don't leave like a text, in the sky that has some meaningful something, I feel like I'm missing an opportunity, because I really think that each thing we do, whether it be podcast or film, it's that you can leave your mark on anyone, and leave a lasting impression. There was a time in my life where I was going through the Narrows essentially, and I there was a friend that I met, and they offered a bunch of books that I could read, and I read all these books. It was in 2011ish, and I read a stack of books that year. And coming out of it, I felt so renewed and refreshed, and it was like this new sense of purpose and direction in my life. And I listened to some podcasts at that time that also communicated a very similar message most of the podcasts were by the authors that wrote these books. And a lot of that, the message, that core message was, what do you tell yourself? What's the message? What's the story that you're telling yourself? And so I didn't tell you this in any of our prior discussions, but when I've listened to you in your podcast or some of the things that you've talked about in storytelling, it reminded me a lot of a book that I read during that time. So during that 2011 timeframe, and it was a Donald Miller book, A Million Miles in a Thousand Years.
Yeah.
And he talks a lot about living a good story, and um, and even just that we remember half of our lives, and not even half of our lives is what we remember. And he has a friend that like writes down every good memory, and he's got like 500 pages of good memories. So there's something really powerful in a story, and also what we tell ourselves, we're living that out. That's our reality. So the voice in your head that's like, for me, Nathan, what are you doing out here hunting? Like, you have wife and kids at home. What are you doing? Are you trying to get this hunt done? Are you just selfishly enjoying it? Like, what's that message that's going on in your head at that time? Like, you're going to live by that and die by that. So you have to have a good positive message going on in your head. It's a recording, like on a tape, that's saying, no, we're out here to get it done. We're out here to enjoy this. This is your solitude. This is your peace. Like, this is where you refresh your life and you go back and live stronger and help out your wife and kids and be a good role model. Like, there's these messages that I play in my head to help me and the hunt, and also when I go back at home.
Yeah, that Donald Miller book's a really good book. And as an English teacher, I was analyzing protagonists and, talking about story and talking about tragedy versus comedies. And then I read that book. I was like, man, this is such a great way of putting it. And I was like, I felt ashamed almost that I didn't think of it before, and kind of surprised I hadn't read a book that had that same sort of idea, but it's just so logical. It makes so much sense.
Yeah, exactly. So I definitely have that strong sense of purpose in the film editing. So that's basically the long-winded version of how to respond to that.
Yeah, and I think you made the comment, and I've talked to a couple other people about this in the films, that it's the people who obviously you're comfortable enough to be in front of the camera and you want to tell stories with the film, but there's a certain something that comes with someone who wants to tell a story rather than be in front of a camera, and it's a very subtle sort of thing. And again, it doesn't mean just because I don't like it doesn't mean that it's bad, but it does seem like there's a good amount of content out there where this is about me. This is about the antlers that are going on my wall. This is about dopamine. Um, so again, like my preferred films are the ones similar to yours, and yours. It's that this is an honest person. This is a real person who wants to tell the story, wants to share it, but out of an honest glimpse into a life rather than how many likes can I get, and the bravado or the attention, which some people find it's difficult for some people to hide that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. I
So go ahead.
Yeah, for me, it's the filming is that I'm already, like, the way I was raised is that we are already going to be filming this. Dad would film and bring home his footage and plug it into the TV, uh, and we would watch his shaky footage of some elk that was running across the hillside. So hunting and filming are like one to one for me. They go together. And my dad never did that in order to put it on a social media platform, so that people would like him more or something. It was that this is the way we hunt. We hunt this way so we could share it. And so that's so much of what's ingrained, rooted in who I am. And I would say that hopefully that's the perspective that I can impart to on those that want to get into it, is that it's the why we do this. The why is that I would be filming if there was no such thing as a platform to share it. I would be doing this anyways. Well, because I used to burn all my hunts to DVD, and I would use like the craziest music that's copyrighted, And I have so many DVDs like that, and I would hand them out to friends and just to be able to say, check this out. Like I was so excited to share. And and it was very late. It was in 2020. I think 2020 or late 19 is when I made my first film and put it anywhere that could be viewed. And it was not very good, to be honest. The film was pretty shaky, and it was just a place for document management. Like to me, YouTube was a document management system that forever, hopefully forever, my film would be viewable by my kids. It could be viewable by my mom. Like that's why I made film number one. And then I think with everything I do in life, I want to I don't want to just do it. I want to do it the best that I can on that day. I don't want to beat myself up for doing a bad job. It's just that's the best I could do at that time. And I know I'm going to get better. And so I was a distance runner for a lot of years. And I think a lot of what shaped me and that perspective is that every time I step foot on the course or the track or whatever, I was going to be a little bit faster. I knew it. I just knew it in my head that today I'm going to run a little bit faster. And if I didn't, I better have a pretty good reason why. uh, and sometimes I did, but uh, I just had that perspective that self-improvement is so much more important in our human journey, is that every day is a little bit is a new opportunity to do something a little better and to live life to the full. So so that spills over into the editing and the hunting and the filming. It's definitely a challenge. It's very hard to capture it, but it's worth it.
Mm-hmm. The getting stuff out there is such a difficult thing, and that's what keeps a lot of people from publishing, because it's just a matter of, well, it's not good enough yet. I want it to be perfect, which is a perfect alibi to never end up publishing anything, because so it's not
Yeah.
perfect yet. It's not perfect yet. And that's, I don't know if it was a podcast or listened to something or read something about perfectionism being a way that, or an excuse for, to hide insecurity. And it's not really about it being perfect. It's just over, you know, way too much insecurity. Perfection,
Mm.
being a perfectionist or OCD definitely is a thing as well. But I think sometimes it's
Yeah.
just that fear. So getting the stuff out there. When you do put something out there, you're not supposed to look at the comments, and most of the comments on your films are very good. But do you ever look at some of the ones or that are like maybe the 1 or 2 stars and think, man, what did this person think? Or entertain looking at the comments and just reading?
So, real quick to clarify, comments on my own films or comments on other people's films?
Comments that people put on your film. So if you go to your YouTube and, say
Yeah,
your Idaho mule deer over the counter, like, and you're just reading the
yeah,
comments.
yeah. I've read every comment that's ever been posted on my YouTube. I think there's there's um there's a few comments over time that have been I don't like music. I like the sound of nature. That sticks with me. Uh, there was a comment from a couple animal rights activists on my bear hunts that were like, "We hate you," and I banned them
Yeah.
like pretty much right away. Um, and then trying to think through, one of my friends told me he would like to see more of the critters I'm filming,
Mm.
because I do try to keep my films moving pretty quickly. And some of that's because I'm trying to get the animal that I'm filming. And so I don't have endless footage. I have enough, and I try to use what's not shaky or blurry or the best. But yeah, thinking about just the comments, people have been very generous, and I'm small. Like I I don't have a ton of viewers or subscribers or whatever. Um, so I think I'm just getting comments from people that you know that already basically would maybe like a hunting film.
Mm.
So that's probably why I get more positive than negative. And if I do get a negative comment, a lot of times I want to understand like where the person's coming from. And for the most part, people are very receptive if you ask some questions back. So you can just ask like, "Hey, I kind of see what you're saying here. Could you tell me why?"
Hmm.
And sometimes people don't want their hunt on blast. Like they don't want their favorite spot, or their like do the research, but just don't tell other people about this hunt because I want it for myself. And so those ones are hard. And basically I usually ask some clarifying questions, and say, I agree with you. And I just feel that communicating the message that we want to preserve and continue hunting as we know it now is a message that is more important to me than somebody else parking in my hunting spot. Because I can already identify, I don't want somebody parking in my spot. And I'm showing you where I hunt. It's just the trees and the ground and the deer. Um, so yeah, one other comment came to mind when you said that. Can't remember it right now, but yeah, did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about that?
No, that was like you said. There's instructional feedback too that you consider, but you can't do everything. And so there's some stylistic thing that someone recommends, and you think, oh, I considered that, but I chose to go with this, and that's more of a staying true to what your vision of it is or was.
Yeah.
And then other things that just they didn't understand it, and other times they're just kind of being mean. But there's some good feedback to be had, and it can be difficult at times to not second guess yourself, because if this person says this and this person sounds smart, think, man, maybe it would have been better if I did that. And that's not always the case. Maybe you staying true to yourself and not trying to, please everybody, which you can't. You be proud of what you put out there, knowing that some people think, oh, I like this shot, or maybe if you did this, or maybe if you did this. It's impossible to have your audience be everyone. It can be anyone, but it cannot be everyone.
Yeah. Okay. So with that said, I completely agree. And music, I think yes, I like when I think about the person that said, music is so obnoxious and distracting. I just want to hear the natural sounds. It's like, well, yeah, but some clips, it's like the hum of a camera. It's like, bzzz,
Yeah.
like if you turn it up. So it's like, you really don't want to hear that. You just didn't know.
Yeah.
And so also music, I mean, humans over time, like that's a way to unite and connect. And maybe it's not music to your ears, but I do try to pick music that is communicating of what's going on. So if it's high intensity, it's a high intensity moment. If it's peaceful and mellow, it's because it's a peaceful and mellow moment. So I do try to pick sound and music that complements what you're viewing. And I spend a lot of time. Actually, the most time is that I have a different database. I listen to music and I try to find something that's representative. And so that's something I spend a lot of time on. And you would never know it. Hopefully music is just in the background and it doesn't distract. And there's so many things to be said about the sound and the music. And some people do very well at just the natural hum of a camera or always having a string of audio in the background. But when you're hunting by yourself, like I'm not constantly talking to a camera and I don't want to be constantly talking to a camera. So it's just every style is a little different. And if you could have a dedicated cameraman, of course, that's gonna help your chances a little bit better in
Yeah.
getting really good audio.
Would you ever want to get to that point where you have a person just following you around?
I mean, if it's my good friend or my wife, like or my kids, those all sound awesome. I don't mind filming for other people. I love it. Like I videoed my dad's sheep hunt this year, and it was incredible. Like it's one of my favorite memories as just being a cameraman. And I was able to stand next to my dad. He drew a once in a lifetime tag in Oregon. It was a sheep tag. The odds were 0.028%.
Wow.
And he pulled it after 45 years of applying. And so I got to live his once in a lifetime hunt and first person and be there with the camera. So that was incredible. So do I want someone to follow me around with a camera? No, not really, unless they were a good friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be. I think I would just have to apologize the whole time. Like, sorry, I'm not very good. Yeah, this is. Shouldn't have wasted your time on all this. There's so many better hunters out there than me. I have a lot more experience fishing, but even with like fly fishing, I think it'd totally be a disaster, and I'd be awkward.
Yeah. Yep. No, that's probably a
So,
good point too for me.
give people the pitch. Tell us what your latest film is, where they can find it, what do you have coming out, Instagram, all that stuff.
Yeah. So I talked about my dead sheep hunt, so I'll start with that. That sheep hunt is going to be premiered or showed in the Full Draw Film Tour, and their first film tour event is in Boise on May 3rd, but they tour, the United States. They have a ton of locations. So if you were to Google Full Draw Film Tour, and go to the tour, I think it's in the menu tab in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. They would have a drop down and you could eventually navigate to where's the nearest location to you. So that would be a cool event to attend, and you would get to see that hunt of my dad. And my dad's Wayne Endicott. He's the owner of the bow rack. He's done it for over 30 years. He's a very passionate guy. I hope that everybody receives his hunt well. It's emotional, and he didn't want me to show it. He's like, please don't show this, and I did anyways. So because I get to edit,
Yeah.
And he's definitely one that's like, he's animated. He likes to be a big storyteller, but he doesn't also love just being on camera either. Like we kind of are similar in that way. But I feel like I was able to capture some cool moments. So that one's just my favorite film. So it's coming out soon. Eventually, it makes it to my YouTube in like a year from now. You can find my YouTube. It's my name, Nathan Endicott. You can find it that way on YouTube or Endicott Films. And I've got 18 films, soon to be 19. Working on an Arizona over-the-counter archery hunt, and it's got some cool footage. That one's going to come out in a couple weeks. That's pretty much it.
Cool. Thanks, man. I really appreciate you being on here. It's been great to get to know you the last couple of weeks, and looking forward to the next footage or next films.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. It was great to talk to you.
Take care, man.
Thanks. You too.